Oh, my favorite One Piece movies. All right, and let me say this because there's actually more One Piece movies than you think, people. Um, but I'm not a stub watcher, and those movies, honestly, from like clips I've seen on the internet, like YouTube and like other shit, I don't think they're that good. You know, that's why they never got dubbed. You know, they never been dubbed. There's like I think 9 movies before these 5 movies, but these ones that I'm about to name are ones that are known and are on Netflix. So watch them if you haven't watched them, and I'm gonna tell you like in the order that I think. Then there's 5 of them. You know, from worst to best. The last one's my favorite, but at number 5, I got Gold. Film Gold is at number 5. So Film Gold, they go to this island, which is basically ran by basically the richest guy in the world of One Piece, and it's like its own country, because this guy's so rich, he can create gold with his dough fruit. Um, he's like his own casino nation on the sea, I believe. Yeah, but the crew goes there and they like, we want to, have fun here, and they allowed the, Marines and pirates to come there too. Um, but they then get caught up by his name's Tesoro, I think, and Luffy has to save his crew, and then they fight against these people. Took Tesoro's guys. This guy who has the gold fruit. Um, and he was pretty tough. Luffy had to use Gear 4 to beat this guy. You know, that's just a little spoiler for you. But people who've seen it, it's good, but you know the Green Angel don't think it's like that great. Compared to the other ones. And there's some people who make appearances too. You know, Rob Lucci and Sabo make appearances in the movie. That's all I'll say. You know, so it's worth watching, but Film Red is just a little better than Gold. And it was because Shanks got some screen time finally, right? And like he got to be in there like for a while. Now this girl named Uta, she's a pop sensation, pop star in the world of One Piece, and she used to be friends with Luffy. Luffy's like, oh, that's Uta, and she's like, oh, Luffy, it's cool. But like she's, her power can go out of control, and to the point where she's putting people to sleep, and like they're in another dimension. You know, it's like they're gonna die. They could die too in like this dreamlike state or whatever. And they have to fight against Uta's power, which is powerful. Shanks goes to the island to calm her the fuck down. Because she didn't want people to leave. You know, she is Shanks' daughter by not by blood, I don't think. But it's still his daughter and shit. So he comes there. The Marines are also dispatched there because a whole bunch of people are, being put to sleep, and these are innocent people and shit. Akahina deploys, both 2 other admirals, Fujitora and Kizaru. So the red hair pirates pulled up on him, and then Shanks is blasting out his hockey. It's film red because of Shanks. And that dough fruit she has, it's like the music fruit, if I'm not mistaken. That shit's powerful. They had like, all this like hidden this lore about the dough fruit and shit like that. And there was a certain way they had to beat her. It was a special way. And the red hair pirates and the Strides team up to do that. And it wasn't that she was a villain necessarily, it's just her power got out of control. And number 3, I got Strong World. Strong World's a great movie as well. See, in this movie, Golden Lion Shiki's the main, bad guy in this movie. He steals Nami. Luffy has to then go save her, you know, because that's his navigator, right? But like when he's doing this, this island is like in the sky, and there weird animals in it. You know, I like that. You know, these animals fight each other, but they're like shot up with like stuff. So basically, they're more violent than they would usually be. You know, but he, you know, this golden lion Shiki, he has the float fruit, and he can send like this island in the sky, and he's basically floating this shit. This man was, you know, a guy who fought Gold Roger and shit. You know, he was a powerful foe. You know, Luffy ends up fighting him. You know, and it takes, you know, some, you know, energy out of Luffy. You know, it's not an easy fought battle. You know, and he, you know, defeats him in the end. You know, but it's still a good movie to watch. Now, number two, I have Film Z. This one's about former admiral of the Navy. You know, he created the Neo Marines because he didn't like the way that the Marines were being ran. See, they allow like warlords and other things to, you know, pirates working with the Marines. You know, that's not how this shit should be ran. You know, he lost his family to pirates and other things, and they just, you know, allowed this shit to go on. You know, he would be way more effective creating his own Marine like organization and, you know, eliminating all pirates by destroying these endpoints. These endpoints, all three of them go off and it destroys the islands. But that's the thing, these islands hold like civilians on them. You know, he was kind of like radical in the way he was seeing things. You know, his intentions were to wipe out the pirates, but in wiping out the pirates, he was also going to wipe out innocent civilians. So the Marines and Luffy. Now, Luffy didn't want to fight Zeph or Zed, my bad, necessarily, but he destroyed his ship. You know, beat the fuck out of the sun, and he, you know, fucked it up. And um, he was like, you know, what are you gonna do? And he had to get his hat back from him too. And he's like, Reddy or Shank sent you on this path, you know, he'll die with the rest of them and shit, you know, because I'm getting rid of all of them, you know, and he had a like good fight against this guy, you know, but he was just fighting to get his hat back, you know, essentially. But it was still like a big deal and shit. Like everybody got involved. The Marines got involved too, but you know, and they respected this guy, you know, the Marines, you know, and they have Avril Lavigne, you know, she, you know, was playing that song. How You Remind Me. You know, I like that ending too. You know, just that music at the end, it was cool. I really like that movie. You know, but number one though, that's Stampede. So the Stampede movie was actually cool too, right? Because it had all these pirates coming together to win a special prize. And this prize was, you know, a log post to basically the One Piece, and everybody was gathered there. But this guy, like all the supernovas and basically any pirate you could think of, almost any pirate you could think of. And then the Marines hear about it and they're like, oh, we needed to dispatch, you know, we need to send people over there to fucking, you know, stop that shit. You know, and, you know, Luffy is there, but there's a guy named Douglas Bullet, you know, who was a member of Gold Rider's crew. He's a conqueror user too. So he's fighting against Luffy, you know, and you know Luffy is having a tough time with this guy too. This guy was, you know, pretty damn tough, but Luffy ends up winning. And then, you know, he, you know, shows some things. You know, Luffy's like, you know, I don't care about that. You know, this is what everybody's fighting for. You know, he breaks it basically. You know, and you know what I mean. You know, if you watch this movie, but it's my favorite out of all five of them. You know, and you guys should watch them if you watch the um, series too. And I'm like rewatching it for you guys and letting you know which episodes are good and which ones ain't, basically. You know, by giving the like 9 out of 10 ratings and shit. But if I'm giving all these ratings and shit, right? You know, gold could probably get an 8. You know, red 8. You know, like high 8s. You know, Um, Strong World gets a 9, like a low 9, like 9.1 or some shit like that. For Red, it's like 9.8 or 8.8. Gold 8.7. We give Z like 9.4, and Stampede will get like a man 9.6. These movies are cool. If you don't want to watch the series and you're like, oh, well, I want to see a movie, there's 5 movies, and I just named them all here. And like I told you, based upon worst from worst to best. So that's this video for today. And be cool, call in the corner and let me know if you're gonna watch these movies or not.